There's an unwritten rule in journalism that you, the reporter, never becomes the story. But resentment among two classes of media bubbled over last week at the leaders' debate, spilling into the public realm. That's today's conversation on Follow Lead podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Valerie McLaughlin. Before we get into the conversation, I want to address my lack of uploads in recent weeks. I'm heading into my so-called busy season, which involves a lot of outdoor work. This gives me a lot of time to think about political topics, but not a lot of time to write scripts for the podcast. Before we get into the conversation, I want to go over three definitions. When I say established media, I'm referring to traditional mainstream media such as news networks like CBC, CTV, and newspapers like the Globe and Mail or the Toronto Star. When I say independent media, I mean new media. This media often uses platforms such as TikTok, YouTube, or X. Some are quite large and organized, while others are operating on a shoestring budget, just simply using their phones, producing journalistic content that they post online. A scrum is like a chaotic, hastily convened news conference. Usually the media is gathered together, waiting for a politician to emerge. Once they see the politician, they pounce, usually forming a circle around the subject, and they start shouting questions. The scrum ends when the politician has had enough and leaves. Last week, the divide between established and independent media cracked open for everyone to see. Due to previous lawsuits, independent media were granted access to the leaders' debates in Montreal. They joined established media in the press area. Typically after the debates, each leader is escorted into the media area where the press asks questions. For a while, I've been noticing a growing disdain from established media about independent media gaining access to their spaces. A reporter from Rebel News asked Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre shortly before the election was called, or it could have been the day the election was called, about his thoughts regarding the vote during the Liberal leadership race. A well-known columnist and TV pundit made a scoffing comment about the question that was asked by this reporter. In my opinion, it's ironic that established media is criticizing fellow media about the questions they ask, considering, one, they are the media, freedom of the press, and two, this is the same media that has been pushing back at Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre about limiting media and probing beforehand what kind of questions they're going to ask him. Things between the two classes of media blew up during the English leaders' debate last week. And what sparked it was the number of questions and types of questions independent media journalists asked the night before after the French debate. The media's ire seemed to be directed at Juno and Rebel News. The reporters from these outfits were able to ask several questions of the leaders during the so-called scrum. When I mean so-called, I mean that reporters were lined up at microphones and took turns questioning the leaders. It wasn't your traditional elbows up, get out of my way scrum. On CBC's Power and Politics last Thursday, media pundits as well as host David Cochrane went on a bit of a tirade against independent media. Mr. Cochrane's guests, including Robert Fife of the Globe and Mail, shared his strong opinions. Here's the clip.
But these are not journalists. No. These are right-wing agitators. Right. And what they do is they use these kind of stunts and antics to raise money. We have seen these people chase down liberal politicians or NDP politicians, screaming in their faces, and then they try to raise money off of it. But when they go to deal with Mr. Poilievre, they're like little puppy dogs. Hello, Mr. Poilievre, very nicely. And it is a disgrace to have these people pretend that they're journalists. We all work for different organizations. Some of ours may have editorials maybe lean to the right or to the left or in the middle. But the journalists themselves conduct themselves honorably and try to be as fair as they possibly can. These are not journalists. These are people who are political partisans who try to raise money because of what they're doing with their right-wing antics. That's simple it is.
David Cochrane didn't hold back either. And here's the clip.
Broadcast inside a fully accredited media environment. I don't know what happened in that media room, though I'm sure there's going to be video of that and what happened on this set on the internet, if it's not there already, because this will be something used to try to discredit us, discredit the CBC, discredit professional mainstream media and raise money off it. But, last night Canadians got to see, JD, what we all kind of see sometimes in these things. We're told not to make too big a deal out of it, not make it about us, but it's an election and it's a leaders debate, man. And this is just nonsense that this is able to happen to people.
Yeah.
The incident that Mr. Cochrane is likely referring to is a conversation between Keenan Bexte of the Counter Signal, Juno News, and Stuart Benson of the Hill Times. In a video posted by Mr. Bexte on X, the two reporters were discussing comments a Liberal MP posted on Facebook 17 years ago. To be fair to Mr. Bexte, he wasn't antagonizing Mr. Benson. He was talking normally, asking Mr. Benson questions. However, Mr. Benson became louder and a bit agitated. Another reporter off screen points out to Mr. Benson that he needs to maintain respectful discord as per the rules. I'll play a clip of the conversation. You'll hear the voice of Mr. Benson, who seems to be upset about the number of questions that independent media were able to ask the night before.
And what I really don't enjoy is that everyone else here was being respectful, following the rules, just being considerate to everyone else. And what you guys decided to do was to take advantage, threaten to sue, so that you could try to get more than everyone else. And now, nobody likes you.
At the end of Mr. Benson's soliloquy, Ezra Levant of Rebel News piped up, telling Mr. Benson his facts were wrong. Mr. Benson starts a Google search, revealing that Rebel News and For Canada have been registered as third-party advertisers with Elections Canada. For brevity's sake, I'll do a separate episode about third-party advertising and Rebel News, but I did confirm for myself that both Rebel News and For Canada are listed as third-party advertisers registered by Ezra Levant. After the confrontation, Mr. Levant was asked to speak to the debates commissioner. There was speculation that his media accreditation had been revoked, but it wasn't. This is what Mr. Levant had to say during a scrum.
I mean, Cochrane wanted me kicked out. I ain't leaving. Cochrane's really thin-skinned. I talked to Rose McMartin too. I invited her to a challenge and she declined, but that had nothing to do with it. Anyways, I want to get back to the journalism here, but it's a pleasure to be in the center of the attention.
When questioned about registering as a third-party advertiser with Elections Canada, Mr. Levant avoided answering. He then accused established media as government journalists. Media in Canada that meet certain criteria can receive government funding. Here's the clip.
And I would like to encourage everyone who's watching. You can be a journalist. If you've got a phone, you're a journalist. If you've got a Facebook page, you're a journalist. Yes, it is, Judy. In fact,
but do independent journalists hire trucks and fundraise off of things like that?
I don't know. You're a government journalist. Every single one of you.
No. We're not government journalists.
If you get the government subsidy, you're a government journalist.
I'm not a government journalist.
Who do you work for, sir?
I work for the Canadian Press.
Canadian Press gets massive grants from the government.
No, we don't.
Someone wearing a liberal.
It's an administration funding.
I mean, you're literally wearing a liberal lanyard.
Because I follow the liberals.
Sure.
You know how it works.
Who are you? You Canada, you're owned by the government.
Okay, you like to play the game.
Because of the turmoil that happened in the media room, the Debates Commission pulled the plug on the leaders' scrums. This caused even more drama, as both sides started accusing each other of being the reason the scrums weren't happening. These are some of my takeaways from what happened last Thursday evening. 1. Established media has acted kind of nasty towards independent media, attempting to gatekeep who can be at the leaders' debate and what kind of questions can be asked. The reason why established media hasn't completely died in this country is due to government funding. Established media is now facing the same type of extinction that killed community newspapers. People consume their news much differently than they did 2 to 3 years ago. News consumers aren't sitting down to watch an hours-long newscast. They watch clips and compilations. They are also tuning to other sources such as podcasts, YouTube channels, and TikTok. And this has really increased since Meta decided to end access to Canadian news on Facebook and Instagram almost 2 years ago. Canadians aren't able to share news articles on Facebook. This is in response to Bill C-18 that the government passed almost 2 years ago this coming June. This legislation forces tech companies such as Google and Meta to pay news outlets for posting their journalism content on their websites. Basically, Meta said no way and banned Canadians from sharing news articles. So if a Canadian wants to get up to date and breaking news, they are forced to other sources, such as podcasts and websites like X. 2. As hard as they try, established media won't be able to stop independent media. Traditional media in Canada has been slowly gutted due to job losses. Independent media journalists can produce content on a shoestring budget. Here at Follow the Lead podcast, I write my scripts on my kids' hand-me-down Chromebook that they no longer use. I record my podcast on my phone using a small wireless microphone that I bought on sale on Amazon. My podcast editing is done on my phone. Established media journalists may not agree with the stance of independent media. They may not like their questions. They may not even like their reporting tactics. However, if they continue to try and silence them or chill them out, they become no better than any government, agency, or organization that attempts to limit what they can report on and how they do their jobs. 3. Independent media may be independent, but some of them aren't balanced in their viewpoints. I know that there's some independent media that are simply reporting and documenting the facts. However, the independent media figures discussed in this episode, some of them have made it plainly clear that they strongly disagree with certain politicians. I don't know how much of a journalist you can be if you're constantly attacking certain leaders as well as their policies. In my books, that makes you more of an activist. However, I've never worked in this new media landscape. The last time I worked as a newspaper reporter was in an age without smartphones. I extensively use notepads to take notes. I also wonder what would happen if the Conservatives do form government next week. Would some of these independent journalists criticize a Conservative government? Would they become cheerleaders for the government, something that they regularly accused established media journalists of doing? 4. The media, and I mean both sides, need to stop whining about what happened. Traditionally, media isn't a reflective bunch. There seems to be little introspection, a lot of blaming of the other guy. I can say this. The public doesn't care about how many questions one organization was able to ask. Many Canadians don't think government has any business using taxpayer dollars to prop up a struggling industry. If established media continues to gripe about new media, the public will continue to root for its downfall. My last takeaway is this. Why is the media so accepting of the fact that leaders are answering so few questions? From what I gathered, reporters were lining up at microphones, taking turns asking questions of the leaders. That's not exactly a scrum. Also, asking 4 questions isn't a lot. If this was an actual scrum, it should be a free-for-all. like a traditional elbows up, get out of my way competitor scrum. Leaders should be grilled, not allowed to answer 4 questions at a podium and then quietly leave. I know this podcast episode was a tad long, but I think it's an important subject to discuss. I believe that independent media is here to stay. I want to thank my listeners for tuning in. If you are a new listener, I hope you do stick around. The podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.